Enroll now at Australia's Sydney Met and win a scholarship of up to $15,000. Apply today.
Tonight on First at 9 this Friday the 5th of April 2024. Dealing with the crisis, IMF expects Sri Lanka to reach a deal with commercial creditors by the completion of the second review. Let the games begin. Freedom People's Congress forms an alliance with the SJB for upcoming polls. SLFP Politburo meanwhile to convene a meeting to solve internal crises. Explosive debate. Parliament to debate former President Sirisena's controversial statement on the mastermind of the Easter attacks for 3 days after New Year holidays. Room for improvement. Sri Lanka needs much stronger recovery following crisis, says World Bank chief economist for the South Asian region.
ඔබේ විශ්වාසය දෙනු සෙන්සුරයින් දැන් ළඟම ඇති ෆාමසියෙන් ලබාගත හැක.
This is Derana First at 9. From Studio 24 in Colombo.
Good evening and welcome to Derana First at 9. I'm Aditya Singh joining you live with the latest in Sri Lanka and around the world. Now in your top story tonight, at a time when the government negotiates with its commercial creditors to restructure its debt, the International Monetary Fund expressed their strong expectation that the island nation will reach a deal with its commercial creditors by the completion of the IMF's second review here in Sri Lanka. Those thoughts were shared by the IMF spokesperson Julie Kozak during an IMF-organized media briefing, adding that macroeconomic policy reforms in Sri Lanka are starting to bear fruit and the country's public finances have strengthened due to substantial fiscal reforms. The IMF spokesperson highlighted the critical importance of perpetuating the reform momentum. At the moment, Sri Lanka is in talks with bondholders to restructure debt in a bid to ease its debt burden while taking measures to propel economic growth. Last week, the Minister of Finance called for proposals from dealer managers to support its restructuring of some $12 billion of international bonds. The statement issued by the ministry stated that in the context of restructuring of its international sovereign bonds, the government of Sri Lanka is working towards launching an invitation to exchange its existing ISBs denominated in United States dollars for new ISBs in the same currency. Against this backdrop, the International Monetary Fund expressed confidence in Sri Lanka reaching agreements with the commercial creditors soon.
Macroeconomic policy reforms in Sri Lanka are starting to bear fruit. Commendable outcomes include rapid disinflation, robust reserve accumulation, and initial signs of economic growth, while preserving stability of the financial system. Public finances have strengthened following substantial fiscal reforms, and it is critical that this reform momentum be continued. The next steps on the debt restructuring are to conclude the negotiations with external commercial creditors and to implement agreements in principle with official creditors. The domestic debt operations, part of the debt restructuring, are largely completed, and there is a strong expectation that agreements with commercial creditors consistent with program parameters will be reached by completion of the second review.
Can you feel it? New Dulux Pentolite Hygiene Plus. Refreshing walls for generations.
Dulux. Now, shockwaves were sent across the island in the recent past when former President Maithripala Sirisena claimed that he knows who masterminded the Easter Sunday attacks, which claimed the lives of more than 250 people. Considering of the gravity of the revelations made, the Parliament is slated to hold a 3-day debate on the controversial remarks made by former President Sirisena. According to the Sri Lankan Parliament, the debate will be held from the 24th of April to the 26th of April, as decided during a meeting of the Committee on Parliamentary Business. Speaking to Derana, Chief Opposition Whip and Parliamentarian of the Samagi Jana Balawegaya, Lakshman Kiriyalla, is of the view that the former President should explain himself during the debate.
As former president's claim that he knows who masterminded the Easter Sunday attack sparked a massive controversy in the island, opposition members in Parliament have proposed a debate to be held on the matter to the Parliamentary Business Committee. As a result, a decision was taken at the committee meeting which was held today to hold a 3-day debate on the former president's controversial statement on the 24th, 25th and 26th of April. This development also came a day after the legal matter on the former president's statement was taken up before the Maligakanda Magistrates Court.
In his first interview, he said that he will disclose the names of the people involved, and he said he's prepared to go before a judge and make a statement and divulge the names in a secretive manner before a judge. But he did make a statement to the police, but he was reluctant to go before a judge. He changed his story a little. So the new revelations have brought a new dimension into the whole thing, because it gave us points to ponder as to what exactly he knows and whether he's withholding any information about the whole thing, because he was president at the time of the attack and he was the Ministry of Defense. So we asked for a debate in Parliament so that he can come and explain himself.
A World Bank chief economist for the South Asian region, Francisca Onsog, says Sri Lanka's rebound from the economic crisis is slower than the recovery of other countries that were hit by a financial crisis in the past 5 decades. During a current affairs program at Hyde Park, Onsog said that about a fourth of the emerging markets in the developing world are under financial stress, and Sri Lanka is one of the 3 countries going through a financial stress in the South Asian region, along with Pakistan and the Maldives. When asked about the effects of a crisis on a nation, the chief economist said that on a majority of the occasions, a crisis would inflict a long-lasting damage to a country. However, leaders can exploit the situation to create the right conditions to foster a better future for the nation.
Actually, it's 1/4 of emerging markets and developing economies that have been financially stressed or are financially stressed. And those countries around the world are struggling. Now, 3 of them happen to be in South Asia. And their growth is just beginning to pick up now. So they're not growing much faster than the other financially stressed emerging markets and developing economies. We define these financially stressed as countries that are rated by Moody's as C or worse, or that are identified as in or near debt distress by the World Bank, IMF, low-income country, debt sustainability analysis. So that is Pakistan, Sri Lanka and Maldives are in that category. They are beginning to emerge from the recession last year. I mean, especially Pakistan and Sri Lanka were in deep recessions, either last year or the previous 2 years. And that is beginning, the recovery is underway now. But it's slow. It's not a strong rebound. It's a slow, gradual recovery.
Does this mean that Sri Lanka's rebound could have been better than it is now?
Yes or no? Yes, in the sense of that when in the past, when you had in other countries at other times over the past 5 decades, if you have these currency crises, you often have a strong economic rebound. You can overshoot in growth. That's not happening here. So we're barely back to pre-pandemic levels. But it is better than we had anticipated. So we have revised our growth forecast up because there seems to be a bit more momentum than we had anticipated. But that's still a modest recovery. It's not the rebound that sometimes happens. Growth is being held back in many countries in the region, actually, by these long-standing structural issues that are really long-standing. They've been around for a long time, a decade or so. But on top of that came the vulnerabilities. And the vulnerabilities were really tested with the increase in the global borrowing cost. What is holding back growth now is in part the fact that some of these vulnerabilities have not been resolved. So debt is still high. It remains to be fully resolved in some of these countries. The fiscal consolidation that is needed to bring it back on track is yet to be fully executed. So over the last couple of years, several countries in South Asia have implemented import controls, export surrender requirements, capital controls. All these things have held back economic activities.
Let's take a scenario like Sri Lanka. What is the real downside in a crisis like this?
It's interesting. Crisis can do 2 things. One is that they become the catalyst for reforms that should have long been done. And then it can really become a rejuvenation of the economy. You can go on a completely different growth path, but that doesn't always happen. Actually, on average, financial crises are associated with lasting damage to output growth. It takes years to really recover the output losses that happen during a financial crisis. You at least seize it to put in place the right conditions for future employment creation, investment growth, like a vibrant economy that's driven by the private sector, not by the public sector.
Now, Senior Vice President of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, Minister Nimal Siripala de Silva, requested the party's acting General Secretary to convene the SLFP's Politburo on the 8th of April. During the meeting, the party's future endeavours are expected to be taken up for discussion, which comes against a backdrop where an enjoining order has been imposed on the SLFP chairman and former President Maithripala Sirisena. Meanwhile, Senior Vice President of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, Professor Rohana Lakshman Piyadasa, said that the political decisions of the SLFP will be decided only by the committees of the party, including the SLFP's Central Committee. In a later development, SLFP Acting General Secretary Dushmantha Mitrapala lodged a complaint with the Maradana police, urging that several important files have gone missing from the party headquarters.
The Colombo District Court issued an interim injunction preventing former President Maithripala Sirisena from functioning as the chairman of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party. The relevant court order was issued after another former president and senior advisor to the Sri Lanka Freedom Party, Chandrika Bandaranaike Kumaratunga, filed a case against Sirisena over his purportedly responsible discharge of duty having caused damage to the party. Against this backdrop, Senior Vice President of SLFP Nimal Siripala de Silva sent a letter to the SLFP's Acting General Secretary Dushmantha Mitrapala requesting the party's top brass to convene its Politburo. Further in his letter, the Senior Vice President of the party highlighted that the Politburo should convene on the 8th of April as the party's future endeavours are expected to be taken up for discussion. It was also mentioned that all members except Maithripala Sirisena, Dayasri Jayasekara and Shan Vijayalal de Silva, whose names are mentioned in the Election Commission file, should be summoned to the special meeting. Meanwhile, Senior Vice President of Sri Lanka Freedom Party, Professor Rohana Lakshman Piyadasa, said that the political decisions of SLFP will be decided only by the committees of the party, including the SLFP Central Committee. He further went on to say that even if the court order issued an enjoining order by way of legal clarification in the judicial process, the party's future political decisions would be made by the party's committees.
The
court will arrive at a final decision after deliberating on the interim injunction. We are waiting for the final verdict of the court. However, political decisions are not taken in court. The court decides on legal matters. The political decisions of the Sri Lanka Freedom Party will be decided only by the committees of the party, including the SLFP's Central Committee, Politburo and the Working Committee. Accordingly, we agreed to not to join the government, the SLPP nor the SJB. We will move forward independently.
Now in other news, Prime Minister Dinesh Gunawardena concluded his two-day visit to South Korea by meeting with his South Korean counterpart Han Duck-soo in Seoul. During the meeting, the South Korean Premier mentioned the possibility of opening up new job opportunities for Sri Lankan professionals in South Korea and expressed his willingness to promote Sri Lanka as a tourist destination within his country.
Prime Minister Dinesh Gunawardena today rounded out his two-day visit to South Korea with a meeting with his Korean counterpart Han Duck-soo at the Prime Minister's office in Seoul. During the meeting, the South Korean Premier revealed that his country will be opening up a slew of new job opportunities for Sri Lankan professionals. He mentioned the possibility of providing Sri Lankans with new jobs in the healthcare and professional service industries in addition to the existing job opportunities in agriculture, construction and other industries. Prime Minister Han added that South Korea, as a member of the Paris Club, will always support Sri Lanka to recover from the recent financial crisis and to successfully carry out future activities. He further expressed his willingness to provide South Koreans with more opportunities to visit Sri Lanka, pointing out that the South Korean people were greatly interested in visiting the island nation. He concluded by praising the Sri Lankan Prime Minister's move to add the Korean language to the Sri Lankan school curriculum during his tenure as the Minister of Education. Prime Minister Gunawardena meanwhile appreciated South Korea's support during the COVID pandemic and expressed his desire to expand diplomatic relations between the two nations.
Welcome back now, bringing to you some hot political news right off the heels as national polls drew closer. 6 MPs of the Freedom People's Congress inked an MOU with the SJB, creating an alliance dubbed the Samagi Janasandhana today. Addressing the gathering following the signing of the MOU marking the establishment of the alliance, Opposition leader Sajith Premadasa stated that the new Samagijana alliance aims to serve the people of Sri Lanka selflessly. He went on to say that the new alliance stands out from mainstream alliances since it is not based on selfish interests such as dividing up ministerial portfolios and chairmanship positions among the allies.
The Samagijana Balvegya and a group of legislators representing the Freedom People's Congress initiated efforts to form an SJB-led alliance named the Samagijana Sandhanaya. The alliance was formed targeting the upcoming presidential election and the general election. Consequently, a memorandum of understanding was signed between 6 members of the Freedom People's Congress and the Samagijana Balvegya at the Bandaranaike Memorial International Conference Hall, with the SJB General Secretary Ranjit Madhuma Bandara representing the Samagijana Balvegya and Professor G.L. Pires representing the group of legislators of Freedom People's Congress. The 6 members include Professor G.L. Pires, Dilan Pereira, Dr. Nalaka Godaheva, K.P. Kumarasiri, Dr. Upul Galapatti and Wasantayapa Bandara.
Professor G.L. Pires and his group are a great strength to us. We are ready to accept the challenge of securing victory in the upcoming elections.
Now they boast that they rescued the country from an economic crisis. But what is the reality? This isn't a miracle. It is a nightmare, and it is high time that we wake up.
These alliances are not traditional alliances. This alliance is not based on dividing up ministerial portfolios, chairmanships or gazetting various institutions under the party to this alliance. This alliance is a pious alliance devoid of any such promises. We are not ready to come into such agreements with any party. We wish to serve the people of this country selflessly. Unite with us to fulfill this great public service.
The group of MPs who allied themselves with the SJB then arrived at the opposition leader's office where SJB supporters welcomed them. Thereafter, a media briefing was held at the premises.
13 independent MPs came out as the Freedom People's Congress based on policy reasons. We are officially joining the Samagijana Sandhanaya today, and this is what has been happening in the last few days. There is no point in changing parties without a vision or an agreement. So, we took some time to make the right decision. Firstly, the President fears us. The final result of our arrival here is the President's departure. Speaking of advice, keep in mind that a huge group of advisors are needed by a state leader in order to take the country forward. There is nothing wrong with soliciting advice. State leaders make mistakes when they do not heed such advice.
A group of MPs including Lalit Ellawala, Tilak Rajapaksa and Roshan Ranasinghe's group will be future stakeholders of this alliance. When Sajith Premadasa nominated Dallas Alhapperama as the presidential candidate, he did not indicate any change in that decision subsequently. Since Charitha Herath wished us good luck yesterday, he might be hoping to join Ashok Kabesinghe.
In the meantime, General Secretary of the Freedom People's Congress Professor Charitha Herath, who did not join the alliance, expressed his views on the new alliance.
Dallas Alhapperama, our leader, and the rest of the party, including me, have not made a political decision regarding the matter. We are aware that there are various opinions within our group regarding the presidential election.
Leader of the Maubima Janata Party, Dilip Jayavira, claims that female entrepreneurship in Sri Lanka should be prioritized in the interest of the country's economic revival. Speaking at an event in Kajugama, Jayavira went on to say that Kajugama cashews should be established as an internationally recognized brand akin to Ceylon tea.
The MJP Liyabala program, organised by the Maubima Janata Party to empower female entrepreneurship, was held at the Kajugedara premises in Kajugama yesterday.
We need to make female entrepreneurship the main form of entrepreneurship in the country. We cannot revive this country's economy without encouraging its women to become entrepreneurs. We believe that Sri Lanka needs to abandon its negative attitude and empower itself as a nation in the interest of the country's revival. If all those who sob and mourn on stage need to see what motivation looks like, they need to visit Kajugama. I told this the other day and I'll say it again. According to me, Kajugama cashew should be a brand. We need to take that brand abroad. Like Ceylon tea, Kajugama cashew has to be a brand. Now in other local news, the Colombo High Court sentenced a 42-year-old to life in prison as he was found guilty of possessing 329 grams of heroin intended for distribution. However, the government analyst later claimed that the stock of heroin impounded contained 6.17 grams of heroin. The suspect was arrested by the police on the 19th of August 2019 in Maharagama. Let's take a look at other local news in brief.
A network established to distribute narcotics, which was operated by a couple residing in Dubai, was dismantled by the Paliaguda Crimes Division. A person engaged in drug trafficking in Sri Lanka as part of this network was taken into custody while having 1 kilogram of heroin in possession. A multi-day fishing vessel named Kalpani, which set sail from the Trincomalee harbour, is reported to be missing for several days. Relatives of the fishermen on board the vessel requested the Ministry of Fisheries to set up an operation to rescue the missing fishermen. In the meantime, a purse of a woman travelling on a bus en route to Batiklo from Kandy was stolen from her. The incident was recorded in a CCTV camera installed within the bus. Meanwhile, a car which was travelling in Palana Valigama veered off the road and crashed into a nearby shop last evening. The incident was recorded by a nearby CCTV camera. The driver of the vehicle was placed under arrest, and it was later revealed that he had been under the influence of alcohol during the time of the incident.
Now in your business news, the central bank announced that Sri Lanka's official reserve assets recorded a 9.5% increase in March this year. According to the CBSL figures, the country's official reserve assets stood at $4.95 billion as at the end of last month. This figure includes the proceeds from the People's Bank of China's swap equivalent to $1.4 billion, which will be subject to conditionalities on usability. Now, a special luxury train service was launched today celebrating the centenary anniversary of the scenic and world-renowned train service from Colombo to Badulla. The new train, dubbed Dunhinda Odyssey, the third train of the Odyssey train series, comes years after the launch of the Alla Odyssey and Sitavaka Odyssey train services. Speaking at the launch of the train service, Minister of Transport and Highways Bandula Gunawardena also revealed the launch of the luxury short-distance train service named Galaxco, operating daily from Bandaravela to Demodara. Meanwhile, the Minister of Transport and Highways further revealed that the new train services were launched in a bid to enhance tourism in the region.
In a bid to enhance Sri Lanka's tourism industry, Sri Lanka Railways, together with the Ministry of Transport and Highways, launched the third train of the Odyssey train series. The new train service, dubbed the Dunhinda Odyssey, was launched celebrating 100 years since the inception of the train service between Colombo to Badulla. Accordingly, the Dunhinda Odyssey train made its maiden journey today from the Colombo railway station at 6:30 am. The special event marking the maiden voyage of the special train service was held under the patronage of Minister of Transport and Highways Dr. Bandula Gunawardena. The launch of the special luxury tourist train comes years after the launch of the Alla Odyssey and the Sitavaka Odyssey train services. The train will be operated from Colombo to Badulla every Tuesday, Friday and Saturday at 6:30 am and from Badulla to Colombo Fort on Monday, Wednesday and Saturday at 8 am.
Sri Lanka Railways today launched a special tourist train service named Dunhinda Odyssey, which will be operating every other day of the week. In addition, a luxury tourist short-distance train service called Galaxco, developed by the Sri Lanka Railways, consisting 3 carriages with wooden observation cabins, will run daily from Bandaravela to Demodara. These main train services, which were launched as a part of the centenary celebrations of the railway service in Sri Lanka, Alla Odyssey, Dunhinda Odyssey and Galaxco, will also contribute towards the development of the respective regions of the country. The Alla Odyssey, Dunhinda Odyssey and Galaxco train services, which were launched celebrating 100 years of excellence, will aid Sri Lanka Railways to spur up regional development.
The Dunhinda Odyssey will provide tourists an opportunity to witness a number of tourist attractions, including the Horsetail Falls, Sri Pada, St. Clair's Falls, Elgin Falls, Summit Level, Tunnel Number 18, the Idalgashinna Wind Gap, Kitalala Falls, the Nine Arch Bridge and the Demodara Loop.
Now let's take a look at the rupee exchange rates against other major currencies during the day. Now in other business news, the Colombo Stock Exchange closed in green today, aided by financial stocks. The Colombo Stock Exchange all-share price index climbed 0.83% to settle at 11,795.47 points. The index is up 3.07% for the week, marking its biggest weekly gain since the 8th of March. Commercial Bank of Ceylon PLC and LOLC Finance PLC were the top gainers on the index, up 6.2% and 1.9% respectively. Trading volume on the index rose to 83.2 million shares from 73.1 million shares in the previous session. The S&P Sri Lanka 20 meanwhile climbed 1.29% to end at 3,481.54 points. The market's turnover fell to 2.91 billion rupees from 3.17 billion rupees in the previous session. The banking sector was the top contributor to the market turnover, while the food, beverage and tobacco sector was the second highest contributor. Foreign investors were net buyers, purchasing stocks worth 268.6 million rupees, with domestic investors were net sellers, offloading shares worth 2.75 billion rupees. In the latest corporate developments, in a bid to bridge the gap between academia and industry, the Ruhuna University Computer Science Department, in collaboration with SLASCOM, recently hosted the Ruhuna IT and BPM Career Fair 2024. Meanwhile, the Colombo Fort Land and Buildings PLC released the dealings made by its directors. With that, here's a look at more corporate news in brief.
The Ruhuna IT and BPM Career Fair 2024, organised by the Ruhuna University Computer Science Department together with SLASCOM, was held recently. The fair, which saw the attendance of 200 students, served as a platform for budding tech enthusiasts to explore career avenues and interact with industry leaders. The prime goal of the fair was to equip students with the necessary tools to navigate and excel in today's rapidly evolving digital landscape while expanding beyond the confines of traditional academia, bringing the gap between theoretical knowledge and practical application. In the meantime, the Colombo Fort Land and Building PLC released the dealings made by its directors. Accordingly, Anushman Rajratnam, an executive director of the company, acquired 2,250 and 1,000 shares at a price of 30 rupees and 10 cents and 30 rupees and 20 cents respectively. The relevant transaction, meanwhile, was notified to the Board of Directors on the 3rd of April. In other corporate news, H&B Finance PLC announced the appointment of a director recently. Ravindra Dhammika was appointed as the independent and non-executive director of the company with effect from the 4th of April. The company further stated that the newly appointed director does not hold any shares of the company as at the date of his appointment.
And with that, we wrap up tonight's edition of Ada Derana First at 9. Stay in touch with us on www.adaderana.lk for the latest developments around the clock. Thank you. Have a great night.
News and information you can trust 24 hours a day. Visit adaderana.lk.